Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Music 101. Music 101 is created to empower music itself and legendary icon in the music industry. And of course, my partner in music, Mr. Mick, the Dr. Digital.
Oh, you didn't say partner in crime, so I'm a musical crime this evening, maybe.
My partner in musical
Musical
crime.
crime.
Yes. And I think we have a good topic for today. A
I think so.
legendary icon in the music industry. Right, Mr. Mick?
Yes, indeed. Yes, he's been around for a long time, but we had done a tribute show, so to speak, for Chris Christopherson. So it came to mind that Mr. Jones had passed away, so I thought it might be a good time to say something positive about him because we'll miss him now.
Definitely. 7 decades. Imagine.
Long career.
Long, long, long career. And Mr. Quincy Jones, thank you so much for sharing your voice, sharing your talents to the world. I hope your legacy will continue. So, Mr. Mick, what else you can say about Mr. Quincy Jones?
Yes, indeed. You'd cited the right word. Legendary music mogul, producer Quincy Jones had recently passed away. He was 91 years young. And he was born in 1933, an American record producer, composer, arranger, conductor, trumpeter, and band leader. So, over the course of his 7 decade career, can you imagine having a career 7 decades? He had achieved many accolades during his time. So, in the industry, he won an unbelievable number of 28 Grammys and he was nominated 80 times. So, he also got a Primetime Emmy Award, a Tony Award, as well as nominations for 7 Academy Awards and 4 Golden Globe Awards. And one of the things I'd point out about him is that he worked with jazz artists, he worked with Frank Sinatra, he worked with pop artists. So it's one of those individuals that you can see just from all the things he could do: producer, composer, arranger, and some of the famous people that he worked with. So, pretty unbelievable career. So, quite impressive. And, just all kinds of things that he produced and was a part of for 70 years. It's almost unbelievable a person could have that long of a career.
Yes, we truly remember you. So, what was his earliest pop success?
Interesting because he did come to prominence in the 1950s primarily as a jazz arranger and a conductor, but he got entered into pop music. And this is a really unusual thing. It's a small world, right? In 1956, he played second trumpet in the studio band that supported the 21-year-old Elvis Presley in his first 6 television appearances. And Presley sang Heartbreak Hotel, which became his first #1 record and the Billboard Magazine Pop Record of the Year. However, he then went on to be a producer as well. He produced all 4 million selling singles for Leslie Gore during the early and mid 1960s, including It's My Party, US #1, its sequel, Judy's Turn to Cry, #5, She's a Fool, also a #5 in 1963, and You Don't Own Me, #2 for 4 weeks in 1964. He continued to produce Leslie Gore until 1966, and she had other hits along with him. That's the Way the Boys Are, #12, 64, and The Look of Love, #27, 65, Maybe I Know, #14, 64, Sunshine, Lollipops, and Rainbows, not kidding, #13 in 1965, and My Town, My Guy, and Me, and #32 in 1965. So when you go way back when, it's a seminal original recording of a much covered dawn of the swinging 60s mega anthem, It's My Party. So it was produced by Quincy Jones, his very first hit single. With a lot of good fortune and mistakes and sheer grit, it's the version that was plucked from obscurity by the, not kidding, 16-year-old Leslie Gore with Jones that made history. While it was recorded but put on hold, there were versions by the British star Ellen Shapiro and the Americans, Crystals. We all talked about Phil Spector, produced by Phil Spector, but they got their song out first. And since he knew about it, he rushed home from a gig. He pressed 100 copies to get it out first, and then the rest is history. It became a big hit for him. So, with the familiarity of It's My Party and that Business of Cash In album, I'll Cry If I Want to, where 6 of the album's 12 tracks featured the word cry in their title. It's My Party, a song totally about crying, not being one of them, but we're skirting around Gore's debut for her more mature, sonically superior second win. You Don't Own Me was the older and wiser, now that she was 17-year-old. The next year is a careful, dangerous track. It's got a soaring string-powered chorus, and that's because of Quincy Jones and what he added to that particular single, and a vocal drenched in tape delay. The vocal was recorded off to a second tape machine, only to be spun back in a fraction of a second behind the original, and there was a reverb where the sound was literally being played inside of a box, and it gave a very unusual sound. So in that hands-off, feminist themes were very bold and striking for 1964, but as striking as the track's production. And if you listen with headphones and likewise to It's My Party, in order to witness the mix here, it's the dawn of stereo, which for a lot of people after their time don't know that almost all records were mono, but this was the dawn of stereos, and engineers were trying to play with the new technology, and they would push the entire drum kits or the bass hard left or right to give those speakers a thorough workout throughout the track. And so the result is a resting, genuinely high-tech, wide sound that's well worth the listen. So in conclusion, You Don't Own Me failed to top number one. It's My Party, stalling at number two. But let's talk about who she was behind. It, in fact, was behind the Beatles, and that was behind the Beatles
Wow.
song, I Want to Hold Your Hand. So it was, yes, second, but to be second to the Beatles is nothing against her at all. So in conclusion, very interesting and early career for Quincy Jones in the mid to early 60s.
I remember that song. Can I
It's a
hold
good
your
one.
hand?
It's
Yes.
well worth a listen.
It's something else. It's worthwhile to listen. So, how did Jones earn his reputation working with Frank Sinatra and the Count Basie?
Yeah, so these were some of the more standard mainstream artists at the time. So Frank Sinatra and Count Basie, this is more in his field because Count Basie is obviously in jazz, Frank Sinatra is pop, but he was also pre-rock and roll as well too. So there were several collaborations between Frank Sinatra and the jazz artist Count Basie. He first worked with Sinatra in 1958. He was invited by Princess Grace to have a benefit concert at the Monaco Sporting Club. 6 years later, Sinatra hired him to arrange and conduct Sinatra's second album with Count Basie, It Might Well Be Swing, 64. So Jones conducted and arranged Sinatra's live album with the Basie Band, Sinatra at the Sounds, 1966. Also the arranger and conductor when Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, and Johnny Carson, most of the Rat Pack there, performed with the Bass Orchestra in June 65 in St. Louis, Missouri. That also was a benefit. And the fundraiser was broadcast to movie studios and theaters around the country, eventually released on this old type of technology. We've also had a show on technology that was VHS, if anybody remembers that. So later that year, Jones was
Betamax.
so back in way back when, what, the 80s, 70s, VHS. And Jones was the arranger and conductor when Sinatra and Basie appeared on the Hollywood Palace, which was a big show at that time in 1965. And 19 years later, Sinatra and Jones teamed up for the 84 album LA Is My Lady. Jones pointed out Sinatra's Italian credentials. So here's an interesting twist on the ethnic connection here. He says, Frank Sinatra took me to a whole new planet. I worked with him until he passed away in 98. He left me his ring. I never take it off. Now, when I go to Sicily, I don't need a passport. I just flash my rings.
Oh, wow.
He was a pretend Italian, I guess, is what he's trying to say. So it's an interesting quote. So he also did 1965 was a very good year. It was written by Irvin Drake, hit single for Sinatra, and features that lush arrangement by Quincy Jones. He also did Fly Me to the Moon, another famous song of Sinatra, arrangements on this classic It Might Well Be Swing album, featuring, of course, Count Basie and his orchestra. The legendary Fly Me to the Moon is its lead track, and that's, of course, very impressive. Now, when he did work with Count Basie himself, which he did April in Paris. This is Count Basie's 65 renditions, a masterclass in swinging elegance. So it was recorded on Verve Records jazz album and a jazz record. label. So this is Basie's iconic orchestra with a lush arrangement, arranged by Jones, perfectly captures the song wistful, romantic essence. The tempo is brisk but never rushed, allowing the band to showcase their virtuosity by still conveying the song's sense of longing and nostalgia. Basie's piano playing is, of course, always a highlight. Its distinctive light touch and phrasing added that layer of warmth and intimacy to the proceedings. And that's a recording that's both a loving tribute to the original and a testament to Basie's enduring influence on the world of jazz. So, in conclusion, these collaborations showcase the incredible talent and chemistry between Quincy Jones, Frank Sinatra, and Count Basie, and they are considered some of the most iconic and influential recordings in jazz and popular music history.
Definitely. So Jones is well known for collaborating with Michael Jackson. What can you relate about their
That
association?
So glad you asked because here, if anything, is the most famous collaboration that Quincy Jones ever had. So actually, we know that a lot of the success of Michael Jackson really is attributed to Quincy Jones because he produced three of the most successful albums by the pop star Michael Jackson. He did Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. In 85, Jones also produced and conducted the charity song We Are the World, which raised funds for victims of famine in Ethiopia. So perhaps his greatest accomplishment was helping to shape Michael Jackson because at the time, of course, he was a part of the Jackson Five and he was moving into being a pop performer of his own and almost becomes a mythical superstar, creating a prototype that really means to be an international superstar. So Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones didn't just release an album, they reshaped the music world. And decades later, its power still resonates, reminding us of why that's a masterpiece that's as vibrant and influential as ever. Released in 1982, Thriller was much more than just an album. It was a cultural milestone produced by Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones. It was a culmination of Jackson's unique talent, his innovative vision, and a commitment to pushing artistic boundaries because it had a genre-defying sound, it blended pop, rock, funk, and R&B. Thriller transcended musical categories and became an unprecedented global success. Critics at the time realized it and was almost immediately hailed as something which revolutionized pop. That's a statement from Rolling Stone. Billboard called it a flawless, timeless pop record, celebrating how Jackson and Jones crafted a cohesive but versatile soundscape that could appeal to everyone, all across all genres, from the smooth grooves of The Girl Is Mine to the rock edge of Beat It, featuring the rock star Eddie Van Halen from Van Halen. His guitar solo, that album's versatility keeps listeners intrigued and engaged across all kinds of genres. So, famous words of the lyrics are just beat it, beat it, beat it. No one wants to be defeated, showing how funky and strong is your fight. Doesn't matter who's wrong or right, just beat it. So, very famous and simple lyrics. So there's a creative world, in short, that's a magnetic and universal. New York Times noticed it and noted it. It's a cross-cultural genre bending boundaries from the first note of wanna be starting something to the last beat, the lady in my life. Thriller captured listeners' imaginations, taking them on an unforgettable musical journey. So has a cultural impact and unmatched visual storytelling. So, beyond the music itself and the audio excellence, Thriller also became a visual and cultural phenomenon. Jackson redefined the music video format with his iconic short films for Thriller, Billie Jean, and Beat It. The Thriller music video, groundbreaking horror inspired mini movie, although we referred to this on the Halloween episode. It's one of the greatest music videos of all time. Today, it's impossible to imagine Halloween or pop culture without its influence. It's a 14-minute short film. Thriller revolutionized the music video genre forever, hailed as the greatest music video of all time by MTV, VH1, Rolling Stone, and others. Thriller, directed by John Landis, is in fact the only music video selected to be in the Library of Congress's prestigious National Film Registry. So it's one of three short films that were recorded and produced for Thriller. Continues to reign as the biggest selling album of all time, with worldwide sales in excess of 105 million. And that's back to, say, 2015, 2016. So It's been awarded triple diamond status. That means sales in insects in excess of 30 million. It's unbelievable. That's
Wow.
just US sales alone. Thriller single reached number one in 4 countries, topping the US Billboard Hot Dance Club play chart, as well as charts in Spain, France, and Belgium. Song peaked at number 4, the Billboard Hot 100, making Thriller the first album to feature 7 top 10 singles. So it was certified Thriller Gold and Platinum. Groundbreaking short films for the Thriller album, starting with Billie Jean, followed up with Beat It, and culminating with the epic 14-minute Thriller, totally expanded the possibilities of music video as an art form. So, according to Michael, he says, I wanted something that would glue you to the set, something you'd want to watch over and over. And we have. So, in his 1988 memoir, Moonwalk, he said, I wanted to be a pioneer in this relatively new medium and make the best short music videos we could make. And in the extended prologue, Michael's moonlit date with his girlfriend, played by the model Ola Ray, is interrupted by the sudden transformation into a howling werewolf, while the real Michael and Ola, observing the scene in a movie theater, walk home from their date. Michael teases her by singing the verses of Thriller. So great song, great lyrics. And of course, everybody knows it. If you've seen it, you can't forget it. So it combined virtually everything: music, fashion, and dance, according to Variety, calling it a blueprint for modern music videos. And elevating music video as an art form, Jackson turned Thriller into an experience that transcends audio, creating visuals that are as iconic as the songs themselves. So it's unmatched in terms of best-selling, in terms of hits, and all of those singles that were released from it. It won 8 Grammy Awards in a single night, and this is a record that still speaks to its universal appeal and groundbreaking artistry. Guardian called it, the UK organ said it was an album that perfected pop music, citing how each track is a world of its own, seamlessly into a narrative, creativity, emotion, musical sophistication. Because of Michael Jackson's voice and Jones's meticulous production, all-star collaborators brought Thriller a depth and dynamism that artists continue to emulate. So it's an unparalleled success. It made Jackson a global star, a cultural phenomenon crossing all kinds of divides all across the world. And that expertise and Jackson's magnetic personality and performance made the album a landmark in musical history. In conclusion, Quincy Jones once reflected, quote, we challenged each other, pushed each other to the limit. Michael's creativity and my experience made Thriller what it is. That kind of collaboration only happens once in a lifetime, and that's indeed the case. So, really incredible achievement by these two individuals.
Incredible. As I said, thank you, Frank, for those music. And until now, Michael Jackson is all is until now he is earning lots of money, millions of money.
Somebody is, the estate is.
Yes, until now. Come on. They're already dead, but they're still earning money.
Yes.
So, what other collaboration beyond Thriller characterized their relationship?
Yeah, they started off with Off the Wall in 1979. That really was the project that saw Jackson breaking away from his original Jackson 5 with the family and the Motown roots to establish his own unique sound. So tracks like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You introduced a new Michael Jackson to the world, one that blended pop with disco and funk in a way that was both effortless and groundbreaking. Off the Wall laid the foundation for the genre crossing work they would achieve in Thriller and propelled Jackson to a new level of artistry and independence. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough was the first short film of Michael Jackson's solo career, filmed in '79 for the number one hit single from Off the Wall. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, directed by Nick Saxon, was a jumping off point for this elaborate and groundbreaking short films that Michael would go on to create throughout his career. If you pick just one of MJ Jones's produced hits for this list, was a nightmare. Beat It, Billie Jean, Thriller, on, but Don't Stop clinches it for so many reasons. First, it's the first song Michael Jackson wrote solo and his first single from his first solo album. And this is a way, just watching the video shows how he meant business, because at the 21-second mark, he rolls up his sleeves and it makes clear, I'm ready and here I am. So here with the all new sound, all new elements, all new brand. And Jones, fresh from scoring the Wiz soundtrack starring Jackson as the Cowardly Lion, he was asked by MJ if he knew any good producers who might like to tackle his first solo cut. The rest is history. Quincy imbues Don't Stop with a multiple of musical bombs, from the ambient tin can percussion to the loud, resonant post bridge toms, to the looming glimmers of the dark strings and the party in the background during the break. And of course, don't forget, Jackson sings the whole song in a never repeated falsetto. Think about it. It doesn't even sound like MJ. So the whole business is
Yes.
captured by producer with an acoustasonic recording process. It wasn't some magical new studio black box, but merely a way that the producers used a code to synchronize the 24 track tape machines used to record the track. And with the analog tape was being played, he noticed that the duller the transients on it became, he could hear the tape getting worse and worse each time he played it. So he took the recording to the rhythm section of the band onto their own 24 track, then putting it away until the final mix, whereupon this fresh, never played take would be flown in sync with the rest of the track and as fresh as the moment it was recorded. So very brilliant and very new producing style, and it's got a unique sound. So second to none. If you're going to take a little bit of time, grab and kick and snare from the opening moments of Billie Jean. So if you see this in this awesome rhythm section throughout, it's melting things away to produce that airy tapping percussion and relentless guitar that have been powering the track for its duration. So their collaboration with Quincy and Jackson continued with Bad in 1987, the final album they worked on together, which cemented Jackson's star power. Bad produced 5 consecutive Billboard Hot 100 number one singles, record that no album had achieved at the time. It also pushed Jackson to explore new themes and sonic territories thanks to Jones's skill in producing Jackson's very ambitious ideas to life. So there's a track in there that's a famous jazz organist, Jimmy Smith, who also is a star in his own right. Dropping in at the 229 mark, it magically segues into a similarly explosive synth solo. However, so keen were Jackson and Jones to wring every nugget of gold out of that performance, they even mic'd him up to capture his breathing and the sound of his fingers on the keys as he played. So, who would think of this? Quincy Jones. Bad has an organ solo? Yeah, pure genius. So they also then collaborated on We Are the World in 1985. This was a charitable anthem co written by Jackson and Lionel Richie. The song united all the biggest names in music at the time to bring famine relief to Ethiopia. And it demonstrates Jackson's dedication to using more music as a force for good. Raised a lot of money, also had a good theme. And this was Jones's, actually his biggest hit, recorded a mammoth 12-hour session co-written by Michael Jackson, and Lionel Richie did the music. The band from Thriller took care of the rest of the track. The project raised, or at that time was even a lot more money, $68 million for famine relief. One side note about this is that the artist formerly known as Prince, he was invited and was in town to pick up the favorite pop rock and favorite soul album for his Purple Rain effort. Unfortunately, he didn't show up. And those lines went to Huey Lewis. So a little side note there. And that's why Prince is not on that particular production. But even today, the artists of work of Jones and Jackson can be seen in a way that artists produce, songwrite, and perform. Thriller, Bad, and We Are the World are cultural milestones. And it sets a high, high bar. So one quote from Madonna, she says, "To this day, his artistry and creative genius set the bar for what pop music could be. There's only one Michael Jackson." So, in conclusion, looking back at Jackson's legacy, not only was creative genius, but also the importance of the partnership with Quincy Jones, a partnership that created music that will be celebrated and studied for generations to come.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Those are the legendary icon that we need to remember because we need to continue their legacy. So before we go on, Mr. Meek, I want you to invite to listen to my new podcast titled Law 101. So
Nice.
if Music 101 empowered music itself, Law 101 empowered the law itself because they saying ignorance of the law excuse no one. So in collaboration with Mr. Andy uh, Chemachuk, is a lawyer by profession, award-winning author, and our first episode will be aired this coming Tuesday, 3 p.m. PST and 6 I think 6 p.m. Eastern time because he's in Eastern time. So please you tune in my new podcast, people, Law 101. For those people um looking for something knowledge about law because it's very expensive to hire a lawyer.
Amen.
Yes, and Mr. Andy and I will give you tips, will give you information what you're gonna do. Most especially, I think Mr. Andy specialized in immigration, but the whole thing, the podcast itself, we're gonna talk about law. Our first episode will talk about immigration law. And our second episode will be Mr. Donald Trump immigration law. Tune in, people. Law 101. So, Mr. Mick, let's go back to Mr. Jones. What the other major artists did Jones work with?
Yeah, he worked with quite a few. There's a plethora of other artists. He worked with a book that you want me to write. It was Aretha Franklin. He worked with Aretha
Oh,
Franklin.
wow. My
Yes,
favorite.
I know, I know. So that's why I said it. So got to get her in. Aretha Franklin, Donna Summer, the Brothers Johnson, Miles Davis, George Benson, James Ingram, and Michael McDonald, Manhattan Transfer, Paul Simon, and he did some work on his own, one album that he did himself, which was called Dude. So, yeah, I mentioned Manhattan Transfer because we were chatting, and I said I actually saw Quincy Jones with the Manhattan Transfer, who he did produce as well. But speaking of Aretha Franklin, 1971, A Brand New Me was an album that Quincy Jones produced and collaborated. He collaborated with Paul Simon. He produced Paul Simon's album Rhythm of the Saints, which featured a mix of Brazilian rhythms and American pop music. And that was a critical and commercial success. It had hits like The Obvious Child and Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. So, another song to remember from way back when. Donna Summer, he produced Love is in Control, Finger on the Trigger. And that was a great tune during the pop and disco era. And just when you think that this is just going to be a standard old disco song, no, it's got Quincy Jones's touch to it. It's a measure of a light stepper. The bass drops at 57 seconds in, and things get funky. The bass is mixed high, which I love, and a blend of live bass, synth bass, and a deep mumbled vocoder, but with a killer combo sound that you can't blame legendary engineers for giving that fader just an extra nudge. That was the lead single from Summer's 1982 self-titled album, which in another space of time could have become one of the world's biggest albums. But it all starts with this great production that Summer had. So she moved to 1980, and everybody's looking for the sequel. Unfortunately, people didn't like her without Quincy Jones, and it wasn't quite the hit that they had hoped for. So once she had worked with Jones, things were very successful. And Jones, of course, was shifting gear and warming up at that time for the Thriller, which, of course, would go on to be the best selling album of all time. And many of the tracks on the board shared direct DNA with Jackson's biggest hits. So it's finally its first airing of what he called the New England Digital Synclavier synth, created on the sleeve notes that would go on to provide those clanging chimes at the start of Beat It. It was a track written by Rod Temperton, who has also written some other great hits. So Penn Rock With You and Off the Wall for MJ, and go on to co-write the title track Thriller. So you actually can practically hear MJ's on the vocals here, complete with the oohs and oh yeahs, but it most of all features this stripped back, funky, spacious sound that gives every element room to breathe by knocking the wind out of you. Love and Control reached an underrated number 10 stateside and similarly undeserving 18 in the UK. But if you ever wish MJ had made an album and with Thriller and Donna Summer, that would have been nice as well. This is about as close as you're going to get to hear a lot of Michael Jackson's influence on a Donna Summer track. So very interesting. And then we have Brothers Johnson, George Lightning Licks Johnson on guitar, and Louis E. Thunder Thumbs Johnson on bass. Neatly slid the gear changes from R&B through funk into disco at the end of the 70s. Really great song. I'll Be Good to You, Stomp, and of course, Strawberry Letter number 23, one of their biggest hits as well, which was actually a cover version. And even though they had the big hit with it, It actually was originally released by Shuggy Otis in 1971. And what they had done, it's a very intriguing concept. It's a numbered exchanges of love letters between the singer and his lover and makes reference to Strawberry Letter number 22, the most recent. The singers received Strawberry Letter number 23. Then the song itself is a love letter being produced in song form, and yet looking for what's going to happen as the end of this correspondence that's going back. So very interesting and a very unique sound and a great song too. So if it's pure 77 and Thunder Thumbs, you want to hear what that things were like at that time. Really great track and really great song. So he also, then I mentioned that Jones had a 1981 album with The Dude, and on his own, I No Corrida, he had a fusion of jazz, funk, and pop that was really a reflection of Jones's life of work to date. And he also worked with James Ingram and Stevie Wonder on that. And hand claps go to Lenny Castro. So we had everybody that could be involved. And that too was not the original. That was originally released by Ian Dury and the Blockheads, if you know the UK band. But it was Jones's funkier take, taking funk, jazz, and salsa. That was a global hit. And it comes from a 1976 French-Japanese film in the realm of the senses, meaning bullfight of love. So listen to this, what that tale is about. And you may or may not be inspired. It's a tortured tale of lovers who experiment with asphyxiation, taking it to the next level with the female protagonist murdering her lover and cutting off the private parts of the male. So when you hear this
Wow.
lyric, you see girl, you thrill me, half kill me, that gives the lyrics a whole new things. Very interesting as well, too. So a lot of good songs and really interesting things that come down to, again, talking about the jazz artist Miles Davis and Quincy Jones, or Miles and Quincy live at Montreux. This was recorded in 1991. And interestingly enough, this was only 3 months before Miles Davis's passing. So this is really a critical album because that's the last we heard of him as well. Now, I did mention, we asked me what was one of my favorite songs of Quincy Jones. Well, I have to go with the Manhattan Transfer. He produced them in 1985, and I actually saw Quincy Jones live on stage with the Manhattan Transfer. So in some ways, that has to remain my favorite. That was an 85 album called Vocalese, and that also had a big hit on that as well, Route 66, which of course is a cover of the classic Bobby Troop song, and it reached number 12 on the US Billboard Hot 100 chart. George Benson, Give Me the Night, another great song along those lines as well, too. And a hit for George Benson, one of his biggest hits as well, too. And then Quincy Jones, he also was very well known in the film world. They Call Me Mr. Tibbs. That was a 1970 release of his own, and got some good songs out of that as well. He produced James Ingram and Michael McDonald. Ya'll be there. Yeah, that's kind of what it comes out as saying, because that's how the lyrics are. Ya'll be there. And that comes from a very
Yeah.
interesting connection. So he did work with a plethora of artists, a number of them across all kinds of different fields. So interesting character. His production really enhanced all kinds of musical artists.
Definitely. Speaking of love letters, please tune in after this because Mr. Mick will be my guest on love letters. We talk about love, love, love. So, Mr. Mick, can you plug in your books, Burning America, and more projects?
Sure, yes, indeed. So, Burning America and also On Track Ian Hunter, those, of course, are available on Amazon. Working on the Chipmunk and Woodstock a book as well, too. Some other projects along those lines as well. I've got a book on American history and work-life balance in the queue, as we say, looking at some book proposals. And if Daniel has his way, I'm going to get around to the Aretha Franklin so,
Yes,
book
looking
as
forward
well.
for that. Looking forward to that, Mr. Meg, Miss Aretha Franklin. So, to summarize our discussion, how can we summarize the importance of Quincy Jones?
Yes, indeed. So, legendary American music producer, composer, and musician who had a profound impact on the music industry, virtually revolutionizing pop music, especially his work with Michael Jackson, of course. With his long career, he worked with some of the most iconic figures in music: Frank Sinatra, Miles Davis, Michael Jackson, produced some of the most influential and successful albums of all time, including Michael Jackson's Thriller and Bad, 28 Grammy Awards. Throughout his career, he's been recognized with numerous honors and awards: Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, National Medal of Arts, and Polar Music Prize. His legacy continues to inspire and influence new generations of musicians and producers, cementing his status as one of the most important figures in the history of popular music.
Yes, Mr. Quincy Jones, again, thank you so much for your talent, your knowledge, your voice. And I hope our generation will continue your legacy. So, Mr. Mac, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Partner in crime.
Partner in crime.
Day of Soul.
Yes. See you next week, people, and tune in. After this, we're gonna do our love letters. Let's see the side of Mr. Meek being in love. Moricon, people. See you soon. Another interesting